Well, before this new accident, did that injury heal? In other words, were you all better from that injury, or did you still have it and this accident made it worse? If they tell you this accident made it worse, we have to include that into our bill of particulars as an exacerbation, or otherwise known as aggravation of a pre-existing injury. You have to be very straightforward about that. You cannot say that this is a new injury, because then when it comes to court and the client has to testify about what happened, if they say this is the first time I ever injured my lower back, and then it turns out that they have 3 prior emergency room record stays for lower back problems, what happens? They look like a liar, and it's very bad for the case. It makes them look terrible, and we can lose the case because of that. So we have to be very clear about that. The other thing that they ask for is something called collateral source authorizations. A collateral source is something other than the medical records themselves that might provide information about what treatment they got. For example, medical insurance, that would be a collateral source. Medicaid is a collateral source. Workers' compensation, collateral source. They call them collateral sources, and they're just other documents, other insurance documents that may show other treatment that they received, and also how that treatment was being paid for. So these are all items that we provide. Generally speaking, I would say we would provide up to 2 years prior to the accident, prior to the incident. Now, the problem with that is that if we don't have that information and we provide it, and then the defendant has it, and our client is prepared for their deposition and they forgot, or they didn't think they should talk about it, then they could possibly lie about it, which of course we don't want to happen, because again, that screws up the case. They look like liars. If we had to go to trial, it's not going to be a good cross-examination when it's shown that they lied about something. So the point is that if you're providing the defendants with certain authorizations, you have to send those authorizations with an instruction to Natalia's team to get those records also for our firm, okay? And that way we'll have those records when it comes time to trial. The next issue is that whenever you send out a bill of particulars, if there's multiple defendants, all the defendants have to get copies of that, all right? And you can give Lex Via the assignment of mailing all this stuff out, and then they will do it through LetterStream. All right, so that's something that's got to get done for all bill of particulars. We're in a time crunch to get these bill of particulars out the door, because the longer we wait, the longer it takes for us to get a preliminary conference, the longer it takes for us to get the depositions, and it's a big holdup on the case. Now, as a part of your job as the bill of particulars team, and what Lex Via is going to start to do now more in a more comprehensive way, first of all, Lex Via is going to do everything in their power to try to answer every question in that demand for a bill of particulars and the demand for the discovery. And in order to complete that job, they are going to scour our file and to look to see what medical records are there. They're going to look in the intake. They're going to look through all the notes. They're going to look at all the documents. And the problem is that they work in the nighttime, so they really can't effectively communicate with the client. But they're going to do a lot of the groundwork. And when it comes to getting the document out the door, that's our BP team's job, to get the document out the door. So when the BP team from Lex Via finishes it, they're going to have a list of questions that they put at the top of the document and says, we need this, this, and this, and that from the client. The BP team then has to do everything in their possible power to get that information from the client. Now take a step back. Every single BP that goes out the door, the BP team, that the individual assigned to it, must call the client and always find out what their injuries were as a result of the accident. If they say they hurt their ankle, their shoulder, their wrist, their lower back, you make note of that. And then you find out from them, were you picked up from the scene in an ambulance? Okay, because you got to make sure we have that ambulance report. Did you go to the emergency room? If so, we need that emergency room report, because the emergency room report is the first time, or actually the ambulance is the first time that there's going to be a recorded documentation of what their injuries were as a result of this accident. Sometimes that can help us, sometimes it can hurt us. Sometimes a person will have neck pain at the ambulance scene, and then 2 days later develop lower back pain that's legitimately from the accident. So it's not always the worst thing in the world if there's some items or some injuries reported during the initial encounter with the ambulance, but then come out later. That's a common situation, because a lot of times somebody has a what do you call it? I just drove the wrong way because I'm driving and I've got to pull over and figure this out. So give me one moment. I forgot, when I'm doing a video, my GPS stops working. So I got to switch over to a different phone and get that going. All right. Okay, luckily I'm going the right way. Anyway, talking about the situation where we have to make sure that the what are we talking about? Authorizations we talked about, and then we talked about injury. Right, we were talking about all of the injuries and what we're getting the injuries from. I talked about the ambulance report, the emergency room, the physical therapy. And remember, our clients almost always go to physical therapy either with PMR, who is Jeff Rubin and Joe Barriga, or CityMed, who is Mariana Garcia. If you are missing any records from Mariana or Joe, you just have to call them and they will email you the records immediately. The problem we always have is getting the ambulance report and getting the emergency room records. Those are the main problems that we have getting medical records. But as I was saying, I want to include all the records themselves, not just the authorizations. I want to be very clear about this. Include the medical records in what we send to the other side. That way it'll make the whole process go a lot more smoothly and faster. And include